Hello. Today I will be talking about the theory of transnational capitalist class. Sclair defines transnational capitalist class as the dominance that can only be secured through transnational practices, defined as the effects of what people do when they are acting within specific institutional contexts that cross state borders and create globalizing processes. What this essentially means is transnational capitalist class is the dominance which is secured through the perpetration of consumerist ideologies globally. And those consumerist ideologies are secured through the four key political fractions of TCC. And these fractions are the corporate fraction, the political fraction, the technical fraction, and the consumerist fraction. These fractions were the areas that Sclair said to have the greatest influence on the cultural ideological sphere, and that sphere aims for the total inclusion of all social classes in the culture ideology of consumerism, which proclaims that the meaning of life is to be found in the things we possess. To consume, therefore, is to be fully alive, and to remain fully alive, we must continuously consume. And that is from the textbook, Sclair, 1998. But what these fractions essentially do is promote the accumulation of capital on a global scale. So through consumerist ideologies, they're bringing capital back to each of these fractions. So let's first look at the corporate fraction, the transnational corporation executives and their local affiliates. So these are essentially the huge companies and conglomerates that are benefiting and controlling cultural narratives around a large space. So for example, Apple is number one, and they make phones and computers, and their whole ideology around their products is their products made for creative people, and their products are essential to creativity. Another example we see on there is Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, and so, their ideology is, consuming information, and everything from their culture, their perceived culture in their offices to what you use Google for and what you use the internet for perpetrates that consumerist ideology, which then pays them dividends. And it's important to note that these dividends are not only monetary, right? It's also giving them clout or soft power, if you will, more cultural influence in their sphere. And the more influence they have in their sphere, the more influence they also have outside of their sphere and globally into, whatever horizontal or vertical endeavor they may choose to move into. And then we have the political fraction, the globalizing state and interstate bureaucrats and politicians. I chose to represent this with a photo of Joe Biden here because during the inauguration there was such an outpouring from bureaucrats and politicians globally congratulating the new president after his inauguration, and just kind of a global celebration of the orange man who must not be named leaving the presidency. And I think that's important to note here because there were so many global trade deals that Trump really screwed up, and everyone's just happy to have a real adult back in office again. So I think that's a good example. And next we have the technical fraction, globalizing professionals. This infographic is a little dated. It's from 2016, and it'll be interesting to see how COVID influences these numbers and people's general practices. But overall, people are moving to cities at an unprecedented rate. You see here 75% of millennials work in cities or large towns, and that's felt very largely here in Portland. But this is felt everywhere, and the idea of the big city promise and people moving from all over the world to these large cities or towns with hope to make a better life for themselves or to have more opportunities, possibilities professionally is something that happens globally and is perpetrated by this consumerist ideal. And lastly, we have the consumerist fraction, merchants and media. So that's all the globalized merchandise, McDonald's, Nike, that you can see all over the world, and then media as well. So Instagram and social media, I think, is a really good example. And then also sports, the Olympics and the World Cup are media events that are broadcast around the globe and bring people together globally as well as nationally. In the process of doing so, they are pushing a consumerist ideal, right? You're consuming this media, and through the consumption of that media, they're also pushing on you more opportunities for consumption. So overall, the transnational capitalist class is anyone benefiting from or working to serve pro-capitalist movements globally. The fractions of TCC do this more successfully through the promotion of consumerist ideologies as they're manifested through culture. And culture is used as a system of domination by expressing consumption as a cultural identity. And not only are these cultural identities, but they also move down into personal identities as well. So whether you're a soccer fan or a person who loves boats, right, that comes from the consumption of culture that is brought to us through the transnational capitalist class.